Okay, you guys, The Omen got me. Every time I watch it, I have a seriously new appreciation for it. What Harvey Stephens did in order to be cast as boy Damien, look into the editing techniques, how animals steal the spotlight in some of these scenes, and they will for you too after I tell you about the insanity that happened in the baboon scene. Welcome to Copper Shop, where we are horror obsessed. My name is Tasha Wheelhouse, and today we're going to deep dive into the fun behind the scenes facts that I have found for the 1976 The Omen. And talking about the beginnings of this film, the concept of where it came from, a very basic question of what if? What if the mark of the beast, the man who will bring the apocalypse, is actually a little boy? That question was so strong that it commissioned a script to be written by David Seltzer. He finished that script, I think, in like 4 weeks, which is fast. That original script did have some funky details. It included witches and a full-on coven and more like black magic-y kind of stuff. Donner, he wanted to make sure that the film was more grounded in a reality space because you're already dealing with biblical proportional things of quoting the book of Revelations. In order to put that in a juxtaposition with a modern day rhetoric, he wanted to try and center that as much as possible so that it was easily consumable, which I thought was a smart move. When I was reviewing this video last week, I had some feeling there were no stakes involved, that dad or mom could really do much to fight back against Devil Boy Damien. That was also a direct concern of Richard Donner, the director. One of the things that he justified about the way that the story was told is mom and dad succumbing to insanity by being told that their boy could be the next reason the apocalypse comes, which is something that I would have preferred too. But David Seltzer, the screenwriter, had like a hard and fast of, no, the kid's evil. We're going to be really clear with the audience that this guy has got the mark of the beast. And you got to have a give and take, especially in a creative process. The script itself had a really difficult time getting sold in Hollywood. They got rejected kind of a lot, like a lot. They shopped around what they described as virtually every studio in California, and they finally got it under contract. But even then, in the early stages, they were considering turning around the script, which means reselling it to a neighbor studio. The director made sure to go talk to the head of the studio to be like, hey, let me pitch this to you again. I really feel strongly about this script that it's going to be something. And with that last hurrah, he got his green light. He got his budget approved. He got like 2.2 million, notably teeny. There really is just something to be said about low budget horror films because it's less about spectacle and it's more about character, creative ways of making it work to tell the story and the storied base. At least that's my belief. Why low budget horror films have a tendency to skyrocket. They get another chance and they get like a sequel 3 or 4 times the budget, and then for whatever reason, that film just does not have the same magic. Please tell me your thoughts in the comments below why that is. I'm curious to hear what you think about that. Now we're going to get into casting. The way that the little boy got cast is hysterical. This is probably one of my favorite pieces of story that I found during my research of this film. So as the director's going through this casting process to find Damien, and the instruction he gave everybody, when I say action, I want you to attack me. Do not stop until I say cut. And he just wanted to see what the kid would do because there is a scene where the boy has a tantrum as they're driving closer to the church. And Harvey Stephens, the second Richard yelled action, he kicked him in the groin. No hesitation, just bam! He was so shocked as he doubled over. The little boy immediately ran up and started scratching at his face. And then he yelled cut. And from that moment forward, they knew that is our boy. Harvey Stephens got cast for this part. So amazing. The end of the film that is very famous today is where we're ending up at a funeral that is of mom and dad. They've both died. And then you see this camera pan between Mr. and Mrs. President. And as the camera goes down, you see Damien adopted into the house of the President of the United States. Damien turns around and he looks at the camera. And the director said to Harvey, like, hey, Harvey, I just need you to give me the meanest look you can, okay? The meanest look you can give me. As he's looking, we're trying to get this long shot. The director's saying off camera, Harvey, don't laugh. Harvey, don't laugh, Harvey. And Harvey can't help it. He just cracks a grin. But the juxtaposition of that scowl to that smile was so good in the editing process that they kept it. That wasn't part of the script. It was just in the moment, which is really neat. Another big part of casting, of course, is Gregory Peck. Found an interview of him in the 1970s talking about his part in The Omen, and they did challenge him during his interview to ask, isn't this going to be heavily compared against The Exorcist or Rosemary's Baby? And he's like, yeah, probably. Like, it has to do with the kid and the devil. Only our kid doesn't have horns and yellow eyes, so I don't know. And during the course of this interview, he described his job in a very, very beautiful way.
In a sense, a salesman of the story to the audience, or let's say, to put a more highfalutin word on it, ambassadors of the author, carrying the story to. We're the storytellers. We didn't write the story, but we're the storytellers.
Let's talk about the production choices. The more I find out about the behind the scenes stuff of how things came to be, then I could rewatch those scenes and go, oh yeah, I know how that works. That's actually pretty neat. David Seltzer, he commented something interesting about the production crew. Production crews, cutting corners isn't the right way of saying it. They followed the spirit of the law instead of the letter of what was written in his scripts, and that was just kind of how it went. But when they went to England to work with their production crews, he had the specific scene of the Bible pages covering the room and the windows of the priest that was dead, and all of those Bible pages being put up all over the set. He said he was actually a little blown away by that because he wasn't expecting that much detail and care to go into the set production. And from that point forward, he knew this was going to be an amazing film. Director Richard Donner also was very conscious of how frequently he wanted to use extreme close-ups of eyes. He felt like it was something that could be a little over-dramatized, could be a little much if you weren't careful with it. So during filming, they came up with a very specific rule of the only time you're supposed to have that extreme eye close-up. It's this evil telepathic power that isn't being spoken. The eyes of the dog to the woman, the nurse, when she looks at the wife before she pushes her out the window. It could be overused, but they used it with a specific rule in mind, which I can respect. I know in my review, I was a little glib about the severed head thing of like, that's cheesy, you just roll the head, right? Actually, it wasn't. The photographer is bending down to pick up the special knives, but as he's not looking, a truck with a bunch of glass panes in its bed comes rolling down the hill and stops short, and the glass pane severs his head. As it turns out, they had to change something drastically in order to get that scene to work. The way the script was originally written was as he's bending down to grab the knives, a glass pane would fall from above and sever his head down. Special effects guy, he said, I can't get this glass pane to fall straight. It keeps leafing every time I try to drop it because, physics. So in order to get that shot of the severed head, they had to come up with a completely different way. And that's when they came up with the lateral glass pane from the rolling truck. For a thinking on the fly special effect like that, that's impressive. But they did have some trouble with that shot. The first shot that they did do, that lateral glass pane shatters the window behind, didn't shatter the window. So on the next take, they were just all like crossing their fingers of please work, please work, please work. And it did. The other thing is the editing techniques and choices that went into this. When test audiences didn't want to see the gore that was about to happen, they'd cover their eyes. But it was after about 3 seconds that they got brave enough to look back up again. They said, okay, if we extend the scene to be beyond that 3 seconds, we're going to get a second wave of screams in the theater. And he was right. As people were looking back up, they could still see the head tumbling, and then they got a second wave of screams inside the theater. So that's actually why that was cut to be so long, is it was a conscious choice to get the people who they knew would cover their eyes. In talking about reception of this film after it came out, New York Times gave it a critique that it was a dreadfully silly film, but it was reasonably well paced. And while I understood the editing sequences that happened for the special effects stuff, the rest of it still felt a little on the slow side. And as I was talking about this film with my husband and describing to him, I felt like this was unbelievably slow. I was kind of bored. He asked the year, and I said it was 1976 when it was made, and he smiled. And he said, I know what happened in 1977. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, Star Wars came out. And I looked at him of, well, what do you mean? Star Wars came out. It changed how traditional Hollywood edited the speed and pacing of how quickly something gets cut. And I'm staring at him thinking, wait, what? I'm the cinephile in this relationship. How did I not think about this? George Lucas really pioneered quicker editing techniques and dropping you right into the middle of the action. If you'll recall, the film starts like this. George Lucas retired his membership with the Directors Guild of America over Star Wars, and the reason they booted him out and fined him $250,000 was because he refused to put credits at the start of the film. And I raised an eyebrow of like, okay, well, I liked Jaws, and Jaws came out 1 year ahead of The Omen. And he smiled at me again and said, well, that's because that was a Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas bucking against this formula, shaking up traditional Hollywood. The Omen was probably closer to the last vestiges of how traditional Hollywood edits would happen to be edited, or what audiences expected. They didn't realize they wanted something as quick as Star Wars, but that's because they've never seen it before. Modern audiences probably expect a much quicker editing pace. Star Wars massively impacted my opinion of The Omen, and I didn't even know that. One last fact about that severed head. The severed head was a replica of actor David Warner. But the director, he would take the severed head with him after the shoot, and he'd like hold it up in the cars he was driving home to see if he could get a reaction out of people. Isn't that incredible? I just thought that was hilarious and showed a good deal of his sense of humor. Now we're going to talk about the animals in this film. The Omen is known for its Rottweilers, that is the devil's dog of choice. Surprisingly, Rottweilers were not the dog of choice for this film. In the script, German Shepherds were actually the dog that were described. They couldn't import trained German Shepherds from Hollywood to England. There was some kind of block saying you can't bring dogs right now. And so they had to use what was locally available as far as trained animals, which happened to be Rottweilers. Cool, huh? The director said that the Rottweilers themselves were super, super friendly. They had one stuntman where the dog bit his leg so hard, he actually broke through the leather cover of his leg and injured the guy. Oops. Another fun animal scene is the goldfish scene where mom takes the goldfish off of the table and sits it on the balance of the balcony, which has always bothered me because she had a surface like right next to it that wasn't like precariously balanced on the balcony, but I digress. So she takes the goldfish, she sits it on the balcony, and then she stands on the table to go mess with the planter. Damien runs his trike on purpose to buckle one of the legs of the table she's standing on so that she falls over the balcony. And she tips over the goldfish bowl and it falls down and it splatters everywhere. You had fish like swimming around in the bowl, she sat it down, but then when it got tipped over and it had that slow motion shot of it shattering, Donner didn't want to hurt fish. So they bought market sardines, already dead, dried them, painted them gold, put them in the goldfish bowl, and then used that as the shot for the shatter. He said he had a shot or two of fish like flopping on the floor alive, but made sure that they were put immediately back into water and they were okay. I super respect that. Like, I love horror, but I definitely respect life. I liked that. Okay, we are now going to talk about the most unhinged part of filming this movie, the baboon scene. The baboon scene. Oh no. And this has gone down in history. It could have gone so wrong. It almost did. Mom is taking Damien through this drive-through zoo. Keep your windows up and you drive through the enclosures. It's a common thing that you would do in the 60s and 70s. As they're going through the baboon enclosure, the baboons start attacking the car and the mom is screaming and she's holding onto the little boy until they finally drive away. How they got that shot is insanity. The day of shooting, the director was told by the baboon caretakers, hey, we'll just skip a meal so they'll be hungry. Put bananas on the car and stuff and they'll come attack the car, right? And the director's like, oh, okay. And they do that, but they don't really get that much of a rise out of the baboons. They're used to being seen by people and they're used to being around cars all the time. They didn't really care. And they're like, what are we gonna do? Like, how do we get a reaction out of all of these baboons? Because I need them like frantic and banging on the car. And then the caretaker says, I got an idea. What if I put a baby from the enclosure in the back seat with me? What? Oh, and they do this. They take an infant baboon from the enclosure and the caretaker sits in the back seat with Lee Remick and Harvey Stevens. But they still don't get a rise out of the baboons. Not enough for the director. And then this is what they did. The veterinarian for the baboon said, hey, actually the alpha baboon, the biggest guy here in this enclosure, he's got a really bad cut that I do need to mend and sew up, but I'm gonna have him under on meds. I could sit in the car with him while you get the shot. I don't know why anyone thought this was a good idea. This definitely got the reaction out of the baboons that the director was looking for. And it worked so well of the baboons screaming, baring their teeth, banging on the glass that Lee Remick, genuinely started to be afraid for herself. She's screaming and shaking and she's holding on to Harvey really, really tightly. All of her reactions in that scene are authentic. She is terrified out of her mind because it gets worse. The alpha, biggest baboon in the entire enclosure in the back seat with the caretaker started waking up and she felt it grab at her hair. And the thing is, baboons, even heavily drugged, are really strong animals. You've got shots in this film where the camera's shaking a little because the director's seeing all of this go down and he's kind of reacting and he's bumping the camera of like, what do I do? What do I do? Because it's about to turn into an emergency situation. And he yells at Lee, hit the gas, get out of here, go, leave all the baboons behind. You have the strongest baboon, the alpha male, in the cab, the locked car, with your main actress. 2 main actors. I don't know why anyone thought this was a good idea, but they got the shot, so what am I complaining for? You've got to go back and watch that now. You'll notice that the camera's angled in a specific way where you can't quite see the back seat. And that's because it's got a massive baboon and its caretaker just chilling. Oh, too crazy. All in all, I did enjoy my research of The Omen. I did find some really interesting facts that if I go back and I watch that film, I can smile and say, oh, I know what that is. They're sardines. They're not real goldfish. That poor actress's face as she's staring at these baboons that just want to kill her for having their alpha male in the car. Too good. Oh my word. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this information as much as I did gathering it together for you. And please tell me, are there any facts that you know about The Omen that I haven't listed in this video? Or perhaps other things about how The Omen affected you when you saw it? I'd love to hear them. Please subscribe if you like this video, and you know what? I'll see you next week. Bye.
The Omen is, I think, a very frightening film. Are you pleased with it?
Yes, I think we did what we set out to do, is scare people half out of their wits. I see it as escapism. I think when you become so completely absorbed in what's happening on the screen that you forget yourself for a couple of hours.